Hello there everybody, how are we all doing? I hope we're doing quite well. Thought I'd do a little bit of a stream tonight just because I hadn't gotten to one throughout the day, which is, you know, kind of normal, but yeah, why not? And we got a couple of little bits to discuss, one of them being a thing that has popped up as a major point of discussion yet again, because of an article that was put out by the Square Ball. I like the Square Ball lads, great bunch of lads, all that kind of stuff. However, there's been a little bit of sort of drama floating around the entire thing, and I thought I'd have a little bit of a chat on that, a little bit of a preview ahead of the Leipzig match, and we'd have a little bit of sort of general conversation. It'll be quite nice, and we'll all like bounce off each other. Not literally, that'd be quite difficult to do considering this is a digital medium, but it'll all be a nice vibe. So, before I do that, how are we all doing? Rate your day from 1 to 10 in the chat. That's what I'm gonna go with, because I'm a little bit curious how we're all doing. You know, always good to know. Good afternoon, Krista Gustafsson, who is currently from Stockholm. James House says it's right to be wary of Red Bull with their track record of other leagues, but till they 100% just got to go on the side of caution. Yeah, that's sort of the gist of my position on it, but I thought I'd take a little bit of a deep dive into both sides. Everyone's feeling 7, which is a very specific number to be feeling, I've got to be honest with you, but it's not the worst of numbers. Anyway, hopping in to the article itself, because we need to have a little bit of a chat about it, because I think Red Bull's sort of presence in football is widely sort of critiqued, and that's completely sort of understandable. So, the article is by Wayne Gamble, who is an excellent writer. It's a very, very well-written piece, but it's just a piece that I think I personally disagree on a few different notes, which is sort of fine. It's a 10 at the moment. Thank you, Munchie Toy, considering I'm a big part of that day. And number 2, we got an 8 from Elvis. Elvis, I thought you died on the toilet quite some time ago. But let's have a little bit of a dive into the article. So, the general gist is focused on the concept of no acceptance for Red Bull. RB Leipzig picking up the first trophy, etc., etc., etc. RB Leipzig being the vote holders of all this kind of bits and bats, and sort of discussing how, for example, suburban outfit SSV Markranstadt provided the license for the 2009 entry into German football under the nonsensical term Rasenballsport Leipzig, with RB handily sharing the initials with the drinks brand, etc., etc., etc. So basically a football club that didn't really mean anything, because it didn't. SSV Markranstadt was a barely sort of known football side as far as I'm aware. Bought out by RB Leipzig, who then proceeded to make a football club, which is, you know, it's a weird one, because a lot of people have very, very strong opinions on it. Home fans didn't particularly like it. They bottled the visiting team coach, etc., etc., etc. RB Leipzig not really liked by German fans, which is completely sort of normal and to be expected. But the general gist of the piece is that you can probably slightly hear a baby, my apologies. The general sort of gist goes in the direction of RB Leipzig have a tendency to take over clubs and then mould them in their own image, which I think would make a little bit of sense. However, one of the examples being used is this specific one with Markranstadt, who were, in the nicest way possible, hardly a football side in the first place. They barely existed, which I think is the first sort of note that you need to pay a little bit of attention to. Then, like, sure, they will have had their local fans, but if it wasn't that, then I feel like RB Leipzig would have just come out of a completely invented club. So, either way. But a lot of people point to the fact that all of their sides have the same sort of branding, but they don't recognise the fact that in, for example, the US, where a lot of people have pointed to New York Red Bulls, that's sort of the norm. Like, the whole naming after a specific company thing is normal. A lot of people point to the fact that, well, why is it RB Leipzig in Germany? Because why have you named your football club after a company? Bayer Leverkusen is named after a pharmaceuticals company. I think Bayern Munich is named after a company. The vast majority of German football sides have been named after companies for a very, very long time. Like, if I have a very quick look, Bayer Leverkusen, just to sort of back the point up to make sure I've got it right in my head. Yeah. Founded in 1904 by employees of the paint factory, today better known as pharmaceutical company Bayer. That's already a thing that existed. Naming your football club after a company already happened. And sure, a lot of German fans don't like it. Understandable, because it is a very, very weird situation where it's a thing where, sure, this happened in the old days, but it couldn't happen now, and then it happened now, and everyone kind of goes, oh my god, but not realising that there's a sort of hypocrisy to that. The fact that Bayer Leverkusen fans are like, how dare they, whilst at the same time they're named after a pharmaceutical brand, is incredibly bizarre to me. But then we get into a little bit of conversation that specifically surrounds Leeds United, which is, I think, interesting, and it spawns a lot of debate that I feel is potentially worthy of further conversation. So, to begin with, and I will just specifically read from the article on this bit. When 49ers Enterprises Global Football Group brought Red Bull GmbH into the fold at Leeds 2024, Dietrich Mateschitz, who was one of the leads at Red Bull itself, the company, I know this via various Formula One things, but it continues over into the world of football. His death necessitated an excessive restructure which softened their approach to total ownership, which means that they're going to sort of not completely own clubs so much, but they're going to instead do some more sponsoring, take potential ownership shares, which we have seen. And then it goes on to say, initial fan resistance faded whilst media coverage defaulted to inaccurately describing the company as a mere energy drinks manufacturer. This is something that frustrates me, because that's what they are. That's where they get profit from, for the most part. Consequently, informed discourse around Red Bull has become near non-existent, which matters to us as it's in such vacuums that the drinks marketing firm operates. Now, this is where I think there's some firm disagreement, because a lot of people look at Red Bull and they go, look, your club is guaranteed to become Red Bull Leeds, and we're going to be playing in the Red Bull Arena, and we'll be wearing red shirts. Holy hell, Hummers.
Fund for your little one, thanks for your content. I get my Leeds news from you. I'm a new father myself, and the fact you can be dad and a content creator is awesome to see.
Thank you very much, Hummers. Thank you for the super chat. That's massively appreciated. And I'm very, very glad you get some Leeds news from me. I admit it's not always the best of Leeds news, because I often rely on a lot of other people and I try to do my best to communicate things, but that was massively appreciated. Thank you very much. And it's made me all smiley on the inside. Yay. But thank you for that, genuinely, sincerely. It is very helpful to add to the little one fund. But continuing onwards. There's various mentions of all kinds of bits and bobs in here, such as like the use of various marketing stunts, for example. As far as I can tell, it's I know, I picked that accent because I was like, yeah, you know what, that's a fairly fun voice, I like it. That's especially since we've got a very, very sort of Welsh side, so it made a little bit of sense. But as far as I can tell, the worst thing that Leeds United have practically done in terms of collaborations with Red Bull is they might have knacked up the pitch when they put a Formula One car on it, and that is the furthest that I can see in terms of what actual damage Red Bull have done at Leeds United so far. Like, a lot of people will point to various things that have happened at other clubs, but at the same time they are also like energy drink partners of Newcastle United, for example, and they've not completely taken them over. They've got various sporting partnerships in so many different places that they don't own. People look towards, like, well, they've got two Formula One teams and they're both sort of named after Red Bull. It's like, sure, yeah, they are both sort of named after Red Bull, but that is completely normal in that sport. In the same way that, and I know that people are going to be like, yeah, well, you can't directly call it Red Bull Leipzig. The Bayer Leverkusen thing is still sort of frustrating to me, because people will point at that entire league and go, that's not good, but On that, Rune, I don't know, but I also don't think that's necessarily going to happen. I don't think selling stadium rights is strictly going to be a thing. And even if it is, we're all just going to call it Elland Road anyway. It doesn't matter that much. I know it would be nice to just hold on to it, but almost every single ground in world football right now has some form of sponsorship. And if we also do that, I don't think it's the big end of days thing that a lot of people point towards and go, oh, club's losing its soul. Like, no, club's just making a bit of money. Like, to compete, which arguably is the point of a football club, you need revenue streams. And you need very, very top, high-end sponsors, such as Red Bull, in through the door to sort of secure things like this, which is interesting. Like, the final sort of paragraph in this, by the way, is this is what Red Bullification looks like. You may believe that it can't happen here, but it also couldn't in Germany until RB Leipzig existed. It could, Bayer Leverkusen, Bayern Munich. Again, it's sure, embed the 50% plus one thing, fine, but we don't have that anyway. So, no football club has been named after a company in England, and it will not happen. This game may symbolise the club's developing ties with Red Bull GmbH, but it also signals the start of a more critical phase in the discourse on changes 49ers enterprises are affecting at the club. A lot of people, and this is a big line that I'm going to get into in a second, right? This friendly is inevitable, but we do not have to accept it. Unlike the fans of Germany's traditional clubs, we do not have to accept Red Bull at Leeds United. Fuck Red Bull, fuck RB Leipzig, and fuck this game. I can't really throw myself behind that, because we got to keep in mind, right? A lot of people have a lot of things to say about Red Bull, and that's fine. But acting like this is like the heat death of football and is collapsing absolutely everything, right? Look around not only the league, but Leeds United's history. If you want to look around the league, Aston Villa are currently sponsored by Visit Rwanda. Rwanda, in the last 20, 30 years, was actively going through a genocide. If I've got my timings right on the Rwandan genocide, I'm not completely sure. Newcastle, currently owned by Saudi Arabia, who have a tendency to leave journalists chopped up in suitcases. Again, there's sort of levels to this. Manchester City, owned by the UAE. It sort of adds up and it adds up and adds up. Leeds United, a few years ago, went on a pre-season tour to Myanmar, which was, I believe, at the time, actively undergoing not only human rights breaches, but like an ethnic cleansing. To act like Leeds United are this sort of like bastion of football heritage and all this kind of stuff is a little bit self-misleading. It's sort of putting ourselves on this weird high horse that we don't hugely belong on, because we have been, in the past, constantly at the forefront of the bad shit. Like, look at and this is significantly less bad, obviously, but look in the general direction of the shirt rebrand, for example, in which fans were consulted. The fan consultation, as far as I'm aware, was, would you be open to a bit of a rebrand? And a few people said yes, therefore they did it without asking any further questions or actually sending around any drafts. Leeds has a history of the ownership doing fairly bad things without fan support. Without Red Bull having been here. And since Red Bull had any involvement, since the 49ers had any involvement, keeping in mind Red Bull have only been in any way involved for the last 2 years, in the last 2 years, realistically, the least ethical thing that we have done is I don't know, violently abused Stoke when we beat them 6-0 and got promoted? I don't know. It's a weird one, and I think people pointing to the fact that we're having a friendly against RB Leipzig because of that link as a big bad thing is a very, very, very weird thing to do. Like, as much as, like, as Richard said, if you want to be a franchise, that's up to you, but I won't, the 100 can do one as well. Leeds aren't a franchise. Just not. And on that note, if you're saying you don't want to be part of a multi-club ownership model, we've already done that. We had really strong links with Cultural Leonesa, I think. I don't know if we had ownership shares or something, but we had that weird little, right, we'll send people on loan and then we'll do various bits of scouting stuff. And at the same time, we're not part of a multi-club model. We are still owned by the San Francisco 49ers. We are not owned by Red Bull. We're owned by the actual ownership structure of the football club, rather than a sponsor that has a little bit of a share. But in the same way, I could say, right, okay, I guess we're joining the... Is Larry Nance still at the Cavs? But I guess we're joining the Cleveland Cavaliers. Because was it Cleveland? I don't fucking know. But I guess we're joining an NBA team because Larry Nance is involved. No. There will be if names change, but the names won't change. I think that's the thing that's sort of surprising me a bit. Like, people have used this match to go, but what if? On all of the potential options and potential bits of conversation. It's like, yeah, what if? But the what and the if are fairly important. It doesn't mean it's actually happening. Don't the own 10%? I don't believe it's that high. I thought it was about 5. Okay, this is where it gets a bit confusing because Leeds United website states, and this is I don't know if it's a very specific bit of wording or something, but Leeds United Football Club Limited is 100% owned by 49ers Enterprises Global Football Group LLC, a company registered in Delaware. Now, I don't know if it's just a case of Red Bull invested in the investment vehicle, I guess is what you call it. That might be the case, but it's not really public, the amount that they run it. The 49ers ownership group started as minority owners as well. Yeah, so has Will Ferrell. But Will Ferrell isn't going to own Leeds United. Stop talking about changing the stadium's name, you started. Oh, I thought you meant the club name. No, the club name's not going to happen. But yeah, I mean, if the stadium name changes, fuck it. At the end of the day, look around the Premier League. Like, there's what? 5 stadiums that haven't got a name attached, but at the same time, no one knows all of those names. I still call Hull Stadium the KC, for fuck's sake. I don't know what that's even called now. But, I don't know. Ultimately, though, Red Bull, not as much of a problem as a lot of people are saying that Red Bull are. Sure, keep an eye on them. Make sure that if they actually do the bad thing, that they aren't able to do the bad thing, because obviously at that point, it's a bad thing. But it's not something that I'm as particularly terrified about as a lot of people, which is sort of fine. Anyway, yes, and Reds was a willing seller. 49ers will have zero interest in selling for less than billions. Yeah, they would need to make a vast profit, and Red Bull aren't exactly the kind of company that throws money away into, like, loss-leading enterprises. A lot of people, right, and I mentioned this before at one point, not on stream, but like in a private conversation, and someone said, yeah, well, if Red Bull don't want to make a loss, why do they run Formula 1 teams? Both of Red Bull's Formula 1 teams turn profits. Because the way that sort of spending is controlled in Formula 1 means that they can't really lose too much money. You are limited on the amount of money that you are able to spend, which means that their F1 ventures actually earn money for them. It's profitable. And pointed to RB Leipzig and pointed to Salzburg and going, yeah, well, look at these, because they're losing a lot of money there. And it's like, yeah, every football owner loses money. Yeah, ultimately, as James Howe has said, they have zero board representation. Sure, they can maybe have a little bit of a chat and go, guys, would you mind if we had a friendly against RB Leipzig? But in the grand scheme of things, their impact on the club is minimal outside of chucking some money into it. So I'm not too spooked at the minute. Ah, well, who knows? Anyway, so on that, there's a friendly to discuss, and I will go through some of the sort of basic details of that friendly because I think they're a little bit interesting. So instead of 45 minutes, it's going to be 2 separate 60-minute games of football. I don't know if that's broken down into separate halves or what, but I think we can sort of assume that it's going to be a case of each of those games is going to have a completely different team. We might have some substitutions between them. We might adjust the lineups. I don't know. But it feels like it's going to be completely different teams in each. And I think both teams will do that. So it's going to be very, very difficult to get a proper understanding of who our first team players are here. I think we already know. I think we could already take a stab in the dark and guess at what our lineup will be for the first match of the season. I think Cairns might do both games, actually, come to think of it. I'd like Mahady, but we'll see. But that's going to be a sort of interesting thing to note. What I would say to keep an eye on is structure and shape of the two different lineups that we use. I'm not going to run into a completely deep, meaningful analysis of what is going to happen in this game of football, because it's going to be impossible to do that, because again, it's a very, very weird structure. But I am going to say keep an eye on the shapes, because if in one half we play 3 at the back and one half we play 4 at the back, that's where we know that Daniel Farker is wanting to experiment with things, wanting to mess things about and sort of see what happens if he wants to try a 4-2-3-1 with the 3 being something like Nonto, Wilson, Okafor behind a DCL. Keep an eye on all that. It'd be very, very, very interesting. I'm sort of excited about it to see what happens. Not excited because of the word Red Bull, excited because I just like seeing my football team play games of football. But whatever. It's always going to be a topic of conversation. Anyway, this wasn't going to be the longest of streams. I intended to only go for about 15 minutes because I was going to redirect everyone over to Leeds Lens. My apologies for not doing so sooner, but I will do that nowish. If you haven't yet, I'd massively appreciate you popping a like on the stream. That'd be absolutely wonderful. I'm going to get everyone pinged over in a moment's time. And I think, or what's a thing that we can all say? What do we think? You know what? We'll go back to the standard. In terms of match prediction, I think we are going to win both of them. And it'll be narrow in each, I think. But I think we've got what we need to have a little bit of depth. Because it'll be a test of depth. And like Leipzig have plenty of it, but I don't know. I think Premier League is better than that level of Bundesliga at the very least. So, what we're going to do is we're going to go over there. We're going to spam the word pigeon. And we're going to confuse the ever-loving life out of Leeds Lens. So, I hope you enjoyed the stream. If you did, pop a like on it, subscribe, become a channel member, all that kind of stuff. And I will see you all later.